Good afternoon to you. Mark out of HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane Outlook and Discussion time. It is Wednesday, November 4th. Hopefully everybody got some sleep last night since everything was nice and smooth and everybody knows what's going to happen. We can all move forward, right? Yeah. That's the last that I'm going to talk about politics because at least everything else is now out of our hands, so to speak. We don't have to worry about Florida. And that's very relevant in terms of what I'm going to be talking about today. And there was some, legitimate interest in what could happen with Florida if there was a potential situation where they had to deal with counting ballots and dealing with maybe big power outages. It was just a tiny little bit of, I won't say concern, but it was certainly on my radar, to use a good pun there. So all of that, we're talking about states in terms of this whole political thing that are nowhere near the hurricane belt, and so I can focus 100%, maybe even 110% on Eta and the tropics and not worry about anything related to geopolitical whatever. So let's get on with it, shall we? Here is the latest tracking map from 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Actually, this is updated 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. This whole time change thing, sometimes gets annoying. But this is the track map over the next 5 days with an implied threat to Cuba and the west end of Cuba and then South Florida with Eta as it comes off of Central America, the leftovers of it, and it should still be Eta. I know there was a little talk and speculation that maybe this would be getting a new name, but it's not. The low-level center and the DNA of it is still very much intact, and so it would remain Eta and keep that name moving into the Caribbean, off of Central America, re-strengthening over the very warm waters. And then, at this point, it's a matter of how strong can it get, what's the structure like, and where does it end up once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, because it looks like that is what is going to happen. So let's start with what we know. And we will begin with a satellite animation here, courtesy of the weathernerds.org site. And this is a visible satellite picture. This shows us in sort of a black and white perspective what it would look like if you were looking down from space, from the GOES 16, the geostationary orbiting, geosynchronous orbiting environmental satellite, something like that. I can't remember. You'd think I would know that. But whatever, it's the GOES 16 visible spectrum. And there's a couple of things to note here. First, the very vigorous nature to the low-level center is still quite evident. Still very much alive in here. There's not much convection or thunderstorm activity associated with it over land. And that's important, and I'm going to widen out the shot in just a minute and address that. But there's still a lot of low-level moisture, a lot of heavy rain in here. We are seeing the flooding that has taken place. There is social media down there, of course. There is internet, and so we're seeing some videos coming out of the raging rivers. And so far, at least, we're not seeing widespread reports of just massive death and destruction, which is great. That's awesome. We don't want to see that. And hopefully, it will be kept to a minimum. But I'm going to tell you what, the vigorous nature to this low-level entity that's, the leftovers here of Eta, it's still there. It's just kind of in a weakened state. It's a tropical storm again. Now, when we widen the shot out, this is where it becomes really interesting, and I want to point out a couple of things that I believe are important. So, we see, again, the low-level center sitting right in here somewhere. I'll just put an L. And so that's the low-level center of the storm. But notice, even in the visible imagery, all this area down in here over Honduras and Nicaragua, there's not much in the way of shower and thunderstorm activity. If you know how to read a visible satellite image, it's just a lot of low clouds down here. There's not any of that typical, well, there's no lightning. We'll take the telestration away. There's no lightning over land. Where is the lightning? The lightning and the convection, or the deep thunderstorms, are offshore over here. And this is really interesting to me because it shows me that there's a lot of energy here. There's even this curved banding look to it overall, and that represents a tremendous amount of energy, still there, still very prevalent, of this overall huge circulation and just massive pocket of energy that is residing in the Western Caribbean this afternoon. And that's all at the lower levels. The low-level vorticity is there. We'll show you that in a moment. And then you've got these thunderstorms here, which indicate convergence is all still there, upward motion. And then in the upper parts of the atmosphere, the wind is still coming out in a clockwise fashion. What we are not seeing, I'm going to change this guy to red, we are not seeing a strong core of winds coming across like this, where everything is just strung out. That's a little bit more to the north up here, yes. But down here, that is not happening. The upper anticyclone is there. So what you've got is this low-level turning down here, and all that convergence going on, the air coming in. And then in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the wind is going this way, anticyclonic as we call it, and that is very, very favorable for development. This is still situated, excuse me, in a favorable environment as far as the atmosphere goes overall. Then we look at the vorticity signature, even though the tropical storm symbol is on there. And once this gets back over the water, I'm going to start hunting down some reliable microwave data to be able to show you the structure of what this looks like. But you can see, even with the tropical storm symbol on there from the University of Wisconsin's site here, the vorticity is very much alive. There's some whites in there showing up, sort of white hot, if you will. That's not what it means, but it's very, very vigorous, and that is important. I wanted to know how much of a heartbeat would this thing have left, and that'll matter a lot once it comes back out over the water up here over the Gulf of Honduras, and then begins to make that turn somewhere up through here towards Cuba and eventually the Florida Straits. And where you begin is very, very key to where you end up. A couple of other things to note. The upper ocean heat content is very high still in the area, no doubt about it, and that includes high enough content values in the Florida Straits and in parts of the Gulf of Mexico still. Why am I talking about that? Mark, why did you circle that part of the Gulf? Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to show you in just a moment. The actual sea surface temperatures, these are in degrees Celsius, indicate, here's 28 Celsius right here, that's 82 Fahrenheit. There's 29. I mean, that's really, really, that's very warm. If you jumped into the water and it's 29 Celsius, it would feel good. It really would. Here's the 27 Celsius line. The bottom line here, the areas south down here are very much warm enough to support strong hurricanes. It is. It's just, we're not going to pretend that this couldn't become a significant hurricane, because it certainly could. Elsewhere, the water temperatures, let's zoom in here, the 26 Celsius line, that's your sort of magic line for what most hurricanes need to survive. That's right here, 26 Celsius, which is, we'll just call it 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And it kind of meanders around, whatever, you get the idea. But there it is right there. Everything south, and I'll just kind of hash it, or hatch line, whatever it's called, fill it in with my little lines here. Everything south of there, that's all plenty warm. All of this area through here is warm enough for hurricane activity to get going and or thrive. Now, why would I be talking about anything over in this area? Well, unfortunately, there's reason, and we're going to get into that in a moment, all right? So, whoops, this is sort of the master page that I had pulled up from Levi's site, but this is what I wanted to show you. This is why, as we begin to get into where this is going to go, remember, all of this is what we know now, okay? This is what we know now. This is what we are looking for in the future. This is the future, okay? So, this is the general track of the various models through here, and they are fairly tightly clustered. The GFS operational is an outlier way out over here to the east, and there's a couple of other ones related to that. Because I think what the GFS and its related, maybe the HMON and the HWARF are seeing, is that a piece of energy kind of drops down in the atmosphere and swings eta out wide, and then the two kind of pivot around each other. Two pieces of energy this one, the one over here would be non-tropical, and this would be Eta. And that might happen. And if that's the case, we're going to have this sort of oval-shaped, large area of energy with a lot of rain and just a lot of yucky, windy, rough seas, plenty of heavy rain for South Florida, but not a concentrated hurricane. It wouldn't bundle in this scenario. When you see this from the GFS and it's an outlier, there's a reason. And that reason is that it's dropping some energy in, and you get this sort of oval effect. And I'll be able to show you. It's actually, why don't I just show you? But here's the guidance from 12Z today. And in fact, let's, if I update this, let's just go back to Tropical Tidbits real quick and see if we can get the latest on the 18Z. And the answer is no, it's not out just yet. That's fine. So this is the 12Z guidance, and again, you get the idea. A fairly good clustering, tightly clustered through here for the most part, this sort of backwards S shape, and then that gets it, whatever, out into the eastern Gulf at about day 5 or so. Very, very interesting, day 5, day 6, something like that. So let's look at 2 individual models. These global models. Bring me back on just for a moment. For those of you that have been watching me and know what I talk about, etc., you know what I'm going to tell you, that we look at, or I do, the bottom part of the atmosphere here. Now, the atmosphere is made up of layers, and I like to look at the lower 5,000 feet and the vorticity, that sort of skeleton, the soul of it, whatever you want to call it. Because if it's well intact at the lower 5,000 feet, at the 5,000 foot level, or what we call the 850 millibar level of the atmosphere, you have to go up 5,000 feet in a normal atmosphere, and then the pressure reading should be about 850 millibars if you don't have weird things going on with storms and a lowering of the tropopause and all that other stuff. It's meteorology. So normally, 5,000 feet, if you went straight up, your barometer would say 850 millibars. Normally. So I like to look at that level, and we see what does the structure look like. And remember, just a real quick review, what I showed you in the low-level satellite imagery, it's pretty well intact. This is a satellite animation. This is not a computer model or anything like that. That's true what's really going on, and it's got a pretty good low-level spin to it. That is reflected right here in the GFS analysis. The GFS seems to have a pretty good handle on it. You also notice these little pieces of vorticity or energy over here. Those, in some regards, accurately reflect these pieces of energy, right here. Pretty well done in the GFS. It's not going to nail them perfectly, but that's what that is. When you see these little chunks of energy here, that's showing up pretty well in the GFS. The spiral nature to what I just showed you, and you got to admit that's pretty remarkable that it can do that. So we look at this and we say, okay, at least in the current situation, the global forecast system, the GFS, the main American operational model, seems to have a pretty good handle on Eta and its current situation. That being said, let's look out into the future. So here we are 24 hours out, so this would be Thursday morning, and it's broadening out, opening up, it's losing its definition, but there is still that spiral look to the overall feeder band system, the wind and the energy feeding into that, the low pressure area somewhere right in there. Really, really neat that you can see this in computer modeling. I'm just amazed. It's incredible. Numeric weather prediction. So let's keep on going, and we go out to 36 hours, and then finally to 48. And then here is where I just immediately go, okay, what is happening? Because we see there's a piece of energy right here, and that's Grand Cayman, so it kind of fooled me. I thought maybe that's a little chunk of vorticity showing up there, but there's a little chunk right there west of Grand Cayman. Here's some kind of a maximum here, but there's another maximum over here maybe, and then the whole thing is just kind of oblong. You see this, you just start analyzing it and dissecting it. And then you can kind of draw a line through it like an axis, and well, that's pretty linear. It's not focused and bundled, and that's what I look for. So at 48 hours, it's like, okay, well, kind of strung out. And then the same thing holds true at 72 hours. I look at this and I go, why would it come in down here? And I know it didn't come that way. It actually dropped south and then kind of meandered. But why did it make landfall as this incredibly bundled, almost perfectly round? And you remember the other night, it was nuts. What was it, November 2nd or so, right? That it was approaching there. We thought this could, maybe beat Patricia. All this wild speculation because of what it looked like on satellite. It was never a discombobulated mess. And I know that things can change, but this doesn't make much sense to me. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but it just looks weird. Like, why would it be so strung out and large? And maybe it will be. Maybe the answer is because that's what it's going to be. And then you got another piece of energy trying to drop in over here. I'll draw a little low pressure area there to kind of help. And you got a low pressure here. And then just this large area. And they're going to kind of try to pinwheel around each other. It's like, all right, well, that seems kind of odd, but there it is. So stormy, a lot of rain, breezy, not the worst situation, but certainly not nothing. We don't want to blow this off if this comes to fruition as exactly what the GFS is showing, that it's nothing. But it's not what I'm going to show you in a moment when we compare this to the euro. All right, so let's go on out to 96. So at 96 hours, here it is over East Central Cuba or Central Cuba, whatever, sprawling, large. It's not really focused, etc. Or etc. Sorry, my wife trying to help me pronounce the word correctly. And I remember too, Peter up in Canada a number of years ago was saying it's not etc. It's etc. I try to be accurate in every way possible. Anyway, sorry I got distracted, but it is not bundled. And there are other things to note that are important. Look at this huge area of high pressure sitting over the mid-Atlantic and the southeast United States. So one thing that is for absolute certain, this system, as it comes off and does whatever, can't just go out to sea. Why? Why can't it? Because the pressures out here are rising and blocking it. They are rising. It's going to be a very nice few days as we approach Veterans Day, which is coming up in a few days after this time frame here is November 8th. We're building high pressure over the east, and it's going to be warm and kind of nice. It was chilly recently, and that's going to change for what it's worth. So we have this down here, not very compact, and not much to get too concerned with in terms of wind and surge. Low impacts as far as that goes. Heavy rain, though, for Florida, and this comes on up by day 5. Starting to get more organized, but still kind of a mess. It's over the northwest Bahamas. It comes in over Florida, gets a little better organized, and at day 6, that's where we'll stop. It's just kind of like, well, tropical storm maybe, big rainmaker, and that in and of itself could be a big problem down here with all the rain y'all have had. Unrelated to tropical systems, believe it or not, this area has escaped this year's hurricane marathon, largely intact. But it's just interesting. I mean, look at the overall shape. It's just weird. It's so sprawling, and it's like, wow, that's just a large influence weather system blocked from going out to sea by this high pressure area that's very evident right there. So is this what's going to happen? Well, I don't know. Nobody knows the answer. I'm going to tell you that right now. I don't know, and I'm not going to be ready to guess yet. I've been doing pretty good lately with Zeta and then Eta, and I think even as far back as Delta. The pattern really helped me to understand the potential for those systems to reach stronger thresholds than what conventional wisdom was saying at the time. And I'm not ready to pull that trigger yet, because it's different. It's a different month. It's November. It's not unprecedented, but look at the date. It is November 10th. We're not talking October 10th. And that was wild enough in 18 when we had Cat 5 Michael right in there. That was crazy enough, October 10th, but that's more expected. This is November. So now let's compare this to the euro. And this is where it really gets like, oh, are you kidding me? So, without further ado, at least in the euro, it's every 24 hours. So let's look at the beginning. The euro very well handling the Vorticity Signature. It's got a good grip on reality, and that is extremely important. Tomorrow morning, you look and you go, where did it go? And that's a good point. It kind of dies out more. It loses that identity, but it's right up in here somewhere over Honduras, tucked in here between Belize and the north coast of Honduras and the Gulf of Honduras. And all of that energy just kind of focusing in right in there. It's still there. It's still very much there. And I'm going to say this. I was looking back, and we've seen how the euro this year didn't pick up on the birth of these systems in the early stages. The European model was not very good at that, what we call, the tropical cyclogenesis. And there's been a lot of sort of hemming and hawing about that in message boards, etc. I almost did it. That, the euro has kind of lost its luster. Now, that may be true. We don't have time to go into, well, what's that all about? Wonder why. It's just an observation that we who have been tracking the storms this year have made. That the GFS parallel, the Canadian, have done better at picking up on systems before they developed than did the euro. In this situation, we already have an entity in the computer model. The heat, the energy, the physics is already there. And I think the euro may have an advantage there in what I'm about to show you might have some merit. Okay, well, we're going to have to wait and see. But there's a hunch that I've got that since Eta already exists and the euro has a good handle on it, that even though it's going to diminish, should have brought my water up here, since it already exists, that it's going to do better handling it in the longer term. So let's see what it shows. So this is 48 hours out, and the vorticity maximum still kind of tucked in over Belize, Guatemala, parts of the Gulf of Honduras. That's 2 days out. 3 days out, it pops out into the Northwest Caribbean, and it's loosely organized, and that's similar to what the GFS shows. And just for comparison, let's go back to 48 hours on the GFS. That'll be very helpful to kind of compare the two. The euro is more bundled. The GFS a little bit more strung out. I think we can all see that very easily. That's 72 hours, so the euro's slower. This is 48 hours. My fault. So let's go to 72. The GFS is faster. The euro is a little slower. So very important. I got it straight now. At 96 hours, the euro is much more focused, implying a solid tropical storm heading into Cuba. You do have this other little feature dropping out here from the Gulf, the Northwest Gulf, not tropical at all. And the overall look to that oblong shape that I showed you, and we can compare that at 96 hours to what the GFS shows, and the same general look is there. It's just that the GFS has this a little bit more to the east, and definitely less organized, less bundled, and a little slower. At day 5, now it's like, whoa. All right, so the little feature over here comes down and just kind of loses its identity. There's a little bit of a perturbation in the pressure pattern right over here, and I think that's going to help to pivot this around that you're going to see. But that is pretty well defined at day 5 in the euro, but on the GFS, not quite as much, and there's a pretty big spatial discrepancy in terms of where they are in time and space, right? Spatially, GFS is east of Miami and Florida as a whole. The euro is west of the Dry Tortugas. So that's a big deal. That's day 5. Day 6, now Eta is in the central Gulf of Mexico, strengthening, and at day 7, it's a solid hurricane, and we can look and see, well, how solid is it? We can take a look at the 5,000-foot wind, and the pressure is down to 970, and that is a well-developed hurricane on the western side of this surface high and deep layer ridge out over the western Atlantic, hurricane on the backside of it, and it ultimately heads up into the Florida Panhandle. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that doesn't, I'll show you just for, showing you. And so you go, oh my goodness, that's far enough out in time. We don't have to be too concerned yet. But what I'm most concerned with is the pattern, that the euro is much more aggressive at day 4, 5, 6, 7 than is the GFS. Is it going to be correct? I don't know. And that bothers me. I can't figure it out. I'm leaning towards thinking that the euro may be onto something, because we know that the Madden-Julian oscillation, the MJO, is coming into a favorable phase that favors upward motion for the Western Hemisphere. And I'm going to show you that tomorrow. As we get closer to this starting to happen, I'm going to pull out different tools and show you. We're going to look at that microwave imagery like I talked about to get an idea of what the guts of this looks like. And start trying to figure out the pattern. We know that the Gulf is warm enough to a certain latitude. And this is a situation where as it does move in, it should weaken. We have that advantage over Zeta and Delta before that it is November, for goodness sakes. And we're talking about several days out from here. And so then the forward speed of it will make all the difference. You remember Zeta moved in pretty quickly into Louisiana and Mississippi, even though it was starting to transition and get its butt kicked from that big trough that was digging in. It still maintained darn near Category 3 intensity. So, bottom line, Cuba, the Caymans, Florida, down in South Florida, the Keys, etc., you all are going to have to watch this for potential impacts. I am already looking ahead that I might be heading down to that area, and even if there's not going to be a direct hit, the Florida Keys is a very interesting area to study impacts, and it's a lot of driving, but this is what I do. And I've got a good friend of mine and colleague that will be able to help me, to go with me, Mike Farrow, he's available, and so we're going to look into that. Is it warranted for us to go to Florida? I will know a lot more tomorrow, and then we might have to leave Friday morning, right? So, there's a lot to be watching here for sure, and this is going to take several days to play out. So there's no easy answers, unfortunately. All right, so there you go. Just to remind you, I'm on Twitter at HurricaneTrack, and this entire project is crowdfunded through Patreon. We connect Patreon with our HurricaneTrack Insider site, where you have access as a supporter. You're not just donating, you're actually investing in tools. We have a whole website that we connect up to, our HurricaneTrack.com insider site, as we call it, our premium site, whatever you want to call it, where you have an enhanced tracking map. I'll show you this as we get closer to the event, especially for people in Florida that may not have seen it yet. I know the rest of us along the Gulf Coast, you're very familiar by now. But yes, we are crowdfunded. That's how you get involved. The link is in the description of every one of these videos. So if you want to become a supporter and have access to what we do with that funding, that's how you do it. And of course, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, share and like the video, and let's get a lot of people to tune in and watch, and hopefully educate them with balanced, science-based reporting. That's what I try to do. And I appreciate it. It's good to have you guys on the other side listening to me. I am Mark Setheth for Hurricane Track. I appreciate it. Like I said, I'll talk to you some more tomorrow.